Well, how does this book help understand and deal with this challenge? And what I'd like to do is kind of very succinctly explain the structure of the book and what a reader can get out of it. There is a kind of a longish introduction in which you get a basic course on Yemen, demographics, geography, etc. That's for people for whom this really is a name and not the experience that so many of you in the room have. But then we move on and propose a very simple concept of al-Qaeda terrorism. And this is a concept that really came from the work we did for General David Petraeus when he became commander of the Central Command and brought together a group of experts and asked us to lay out for him what challenges he faced and what he could do about that. And we came up with a very simple medical analogy of viruses and antibodies, which is not very sophisticated, but at least it gives you a picture that you can keep in your head and you can relate different aspects of these efforts. And it gives us a way of talking about not only the threat of terrorism, but also the implications of the different tools we use for counterterrorism. What happens if there are massive American troops on the ground in a location? And then, thanks to Michael Ryan and a presentation he made at Jamestown Foundation, we also get into a little bit of the jihadist theory of safe havens and why Yemen is such an attractive place for them and really almost tailor-made in their aspirations of creating safe havens in various parts of the world. After that introduction, there's the body of the book, and it's a long, long narrative about what happened in Yemen between 2001 and 2004. And that narrative seeks to espouse a strategy and then exemplify how we tried to go about implementing that strategy. And I would emphasize that it's essential to know what you want to do and to have a strategy that has buy-in, not only in the American government, but by the host people, the Yemenis, both government and people. And equally important, to have an execution of that strategy, to have the means to execute it, the resources to execute it. And one without the other doesn't add up to much effect. And time again, I think we get into this dilemma. We want to do the right thing, but we don't have the means to do it for one reason or another. So, an introduction with a little theory, a long narrative, what happened, why we think we had a significant measure of success, and then afterwards, trying to bring the situation more or less up to date, what happened after 2004, in 2005, 2006, and 2007, and how al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula was able to come back and mutate and really come back stronger than ever to constitute the threat that it does today. All of these parts give us the opportunity to learn lessons. And that kind of is my driving motivation in this. What can we do through analysis, through experience, to come up with lessons that can be applied as we confront ongoing threats? My theory is that the U.S. military does this exceedingly well. And they have formal exercises of lessons learned. And they have histories of campaigns, and they have doctrine that's written down. So they institutionalize this learning experience. And similarly, in U.S. business, you find this phenomenon of best practices, where if something works for Motorola, General Electric is going to learn from it and pick it up. And so they're constantly improving their performance. Whereas I would argue, in diplomacy, in the State Department, we don't do this very well at all. We tend to be very, very, very bright people, but we tend to be reinventing the wheel. We tend to expect people to go into a situation and take it from ground zero to success. And my argument, and one of my motivations in writing this book is the State Department needs to do better at learning from its experience and at institutionalizing both lessons learned and best practices. For me, if this book can help in that process and that help in identifying best practices, that's my measure of success. Okay, before, I don't want to go on too long speaking, but I'd like to hit three kind of key points in the book, key lessons learned that I would propose. One is you need a strategy. You need to go out, you need to assess the situation, you need to come up with some kind of more approach that Washington can understand, that your interlocutors in Yemen can understand, ideally that the Yemeni people can understand. And the strategy that we devised in Yemen, it's not very sophisticated, not very hard to understand, it's pretty simple, and it works well in Arabic. It's no development without security, no security without development. لا تنمية بدون الأمن، لا أمن بدون التنمية. Wasn't necessarily my idea. It really came from talking to Yemenis when I got out there, talking to both official Yemenis, people who were involved in tourism, military guys, and trying to understand where they were coming from on the Al-Qaeda question and what their aspirations were for Yemen, and then coming up with a formula that could create common ground between what the United States wanted to do, which was to hammer Al-Qaeda and disestablish it, and what the Yemenis wanted to do, which was to develop their country and have a better life for their people. And building that common ground is what that strategy sought to do. The second lesson I think the book tries to demonstrate is you need a full toolkit if you're going to do counterterrorism. As impressive as that operation was in Abbottabad, if you reduce counterterrorism to JSOC and predators, you are not going to succeed. And I don't think the professionals in JSOC, those SEALs, would disagree with this at all. We can ask them to do important things. Indeed, in Yemen, we asked them to take out the leader of Al-Qaeda, Abu Ali at the time, and it was done, and it helped us immensely. But if you stop there, if that's the extent of your counterterrorism, you're not going to succeed because new leaders are going to come forward, and this phenomenon is going to continue. You've got to address it much more broadly with many more tools. So the toolkit that I describe includes some pretty intense diplomacy, including visits back here by Ali Abdullah Saleh, that most challenging of interlocutors, intelligence cooperations, which unfortunately I can't get into very much in the book because it was all taken out, security training, because success in this is not that JSOC goes in and kills the bad guys, it's that the Yemeni Central Security Forces goes in and kills the bad guys. And development, economic development in those tribal areas so that the tribes see the government's presence as positive and not as something to resist and frustrate, and political development to address the kind of very pressing concerns and demands that we see throughout the Arab world now from the younger people and from the civil society at large. So a full toolkit. The next thing you need is you need essential skills. And I make a lot about Arabic language in the book because in my experience, the best work in Sana'a was done by those who spoke Arabic